In order to take full advantage of the planning capability of the PhotoPills app, you need to master how to use the red and black pins of the planner. And I've introduced both pins in other PhotoPills Friday episodes, but we haven't fully revealed their capabilities yet. So that's what we're going to do today, so stay tuned. Hey there, photographers, Brenda Petrella here, and welcome to another episode of PhotoPills Friday, where we unlock the power of the PhotoPills app to help you learn it without all the confusion. In this week's episode, we're going to learn everything you need to know about the red and black pins of the planner so that you can best plan your sun, moon, or night sky images. So first, let's define what the red and black pins are and how to find and move them in the planner. The red pin, as you may recall, is called the observer's pin. And really all this means is that the red pin represents your shooting location or wherever you want your camera to be located when you take the shot. So sometimes the red pin is at your current position, and that's when you are on location at your shooting spot. But if you're planning from home, then you would put the red pin wherever it is that you want your shooting location to be. Now, there are various ways to move the red pin around on the map, so let's just quickly review those. One way is to simply tap, hold, drag, and drop your pin on a new location by just releasing your finger on the screen. Or you can tap and hold your finger on a new location, and the red pin will automatically move to that spot. You can also quickly set the red pin to your current location by opening up the map icons bar, which I reviewed in episode 11, and clicking on the first icon in the list. And you can go back to your previous location by again going back into the map icon bar, clicking on the third icon, which looks like an undo button, and that will bring you back to your previous location. Lastly, if you tap on the second icon in the icons bar, the red pin will lift up and an X will appear, and then you can move the map around, and wherever you put the X, if you then tap on it, the red pin will drop down to that new location. Okay, so those are the ways in which you can move the red pin around to quickly get it set on your shooting location. When you drop the red pin at a new location, a white box will pop up that gives you the coordinates of that location as well as the altitude in either meters or feet, whatever you have your unit set to in the settings. So just tap the box to then hide it. And if you want the info again, just tap on the red pin again and the white box with that information will reappear. Okay, now let's talk about the black pin. You may be wondering, why do I need another pin anyway? Well, when it comes to planning sun, moon, or night sky images, a second pin becomes extremely valuable because it helps us account for the terrain differences between your camera's location and your subject's location, and also the relationship between those points and the sun, moon, or Milky Way in the sky. The black pin is technically called the obstacles pin, but a common use case for the black pin is to place the black pin on your subject, whether it's a mountain or a lake or what have you, so that you can understand the relationship between your shooting location and your subject. By using a second pin, you can now assess the azimuth or direction of the 2 points relative to north, which will help you determine whether your camera, your subject, and the sun, moon, or Milky Way will all align and at what time that may occur. It will also tell you the distance between the 2 pins, which is helpful for determining what focal length you should use, and also what size of the sun or moon will be relative to your subject. It will tell you the altitude difference between the 2 pins as measured in meters or feet. And it will also tell you the relative angle of elevation between the 2 pins measured in degrees of elevation. And all of this information is provided in the second panel of the top bar of the planner called the pin-to-pin geodetic info panel. So let's hop into the PhotoPills planner and look at it now. Just a side note, it used to look like 2 red mountains or 2 red triangles in an older version of PhotoPills, but now it is represented by a red and black pin, which is a little more intuitive. So the icon will appear shaded if the panel is not yet turned on. So simply tap the icon to turn it on and the black pin will appear somewhere on your map, usually near the red pin. And a white dotted line will connect the two pins. In a moment, I will explain how to use this information in your planning, but first, there are a few more features of the black pin that we should discuss. First, to move the black pin around, you simply tap, drag, and drop the pin wherever location you want it to be. And if you have the pin-to-pin geodetic info panel turned on, but don't see the black pin, then it's likely someplace off the screen. And so if you just need to put it back near your red pin or near where you're looking on the map, all you have to do is turn the pin-to-pin geodetic info panel off and then tap it back on, and the black pin will relocate to your current view on the map. Second, like the red pin, when you put the black pin on a new location, a white box will appear that has its coordinates and its altitude, and it also lists the relative altitude difference in either meters or feet between the red and black pins, and also the relative elevation difference between the pins measured in degrees. So if the relative altitude and elevation are positive numbers, then the black pin is higher than the red pin. And if the relative altitude and elevation numbers are negative, then that means that the black pin is lower than the red pin. And you can, just as before, just simply tap on the white box to hide it. Third, you can also use the black pin to figure out the apparent height of the moon, sun, or Milky Way above the terrain of the black pin as seen from the perspective of the red pin. So collectively, all of this information, along with the sun, moon, and Milky Way information provided in the other panels of the top bar, help you determine whether and when the sun, moon, or Milky Way will align with your subject relative to your shooting location, and how far above your subject the sun, moon, or Milky Way will be at a given time. You can also use the same information to determine whether the sun, moon, or Milky Way will be blocked by your subject. So, for example, if your subject is a tall mountain, and we're going to look at an example of that in just a moment. First, let's see how all this information is provided in the planner. So let's make sure we're back at the pin-to-pin geodetic info panel of the top bar. Here you will see 3 sections of information. The distance, which is the distance between the red and black pins, so basically the length of that dotted white line. The azimuth, which is the direction of the black pin relative to the red pin measured in degrees from north. The altitude difference, which is the difference in height between the ground levels of the red pin versus the black pin, measured in either feet or meters, and also the degrees of relative elevation. This is the same information that's given in the white box when you tap on the black pin. At the bottom of the top bar is where you'll find the apparent height of the sun, moon, or Milky Way galactic center above the black pin when the sun, moon, or Milky Way map layers are turned on. So now let's look at an example of how to use the red and black pins to plan a sunrise image. Now just note that the same concepts can be applied for moon and Milky Way images as well. We're just going to do a sun image as an example. So the composition I'm going to plan to shoot is the sunrise over Mount Washington, which is the highest peak in New Hampshire. And I know that there is a good view of the mountain from the Mount Washington resort on a clear day. So I'm going to put my red pin at the Mount Washington Resort and use that as my shooting location. Now, I already have this shooting location saved as a point of interest, and so I'll go ahead and load it into the planner now. So to do that, I'm just going to go to the bottom of the screen, click Load, click Point of Interest, and then look for the Mount Washington Resort and click on it. And now my red pin has been dropped at that new location. And if I zoom in on the map, I can see that my red pin is on the Mount Washington Resort as indicated by this red roofed building. Okay, so now the next step is to get the black pin set on Mount Washington. And right now my black pin is back where I left it. So I'm going to tap on the pin-to-pin geodetic info panel to turn it off and tap it to turn it back on again. And now you can see that the black pin has been relocated to the bottom of my screen. And now it's in the vicinity of the red pin. So now I'm going to zoom out to find the top of Mount Washington, which is actually this barren looking area here. And I'm going to tap, hold, and drag and drop my black pin there. And there's an observatory at the top of the mountain, and ideally I would like the black pin to be over the observatory, and that's where I'm going to put the black pin. Okay, so now that I've placed the black pin, you can see the white box of information telling me the altitude of Mount Washington, which is at this point 6,266 feet, and the relative difference in altitude and elevation between the red and black pins. Okay, so now if I look at the top panel, I can see that the distance between my red and black pins is 6.8 miles, and the azimuth, or the direction of the line when we draw a line between the red and black pins, is 82.5 degrees from north. And the altitude difference and the angle of elevation difference is also given in the top bar, just as it is here in the white box. So I'm just going to tap the white box for now to hide it. Now I'm going to zoom out and scroll through the timeline so that I can see the path of the sun as it travels over time. Recall from episode 3 that the thick yellow line indicates the azimuth of the sunrise, and the thin yellow line indicates the azimuth of the sun as it travels throughout the course of the day. If I scroll the top bar to the fourth panel, which is the sun and moon rise and set info panel, then I see that for this date and this location, that sunrise will be at 6:01 a.m. Now I'll scroll back to the pin-to-pin geodetic info panel and see what the azimuth of the red and black pin lines is. And again, it is 82.5 degrees. So if I want the sun to rise above the observatory on Mount Washington, then the sun needs to be at that same azimuth. Okay, so now scroll the top bar to the third panel to see the azimuth and elevation information for the sun or moon. And I can now scroll the timeline until the sun is at an azimuth of 82.5 degrees. And the thin yellow line should then be aligned with my white dotted line between the red and black pins. And just as a side note, it's easier to scroll the timeline. If you tap and hold it, it will expand out the hours and you have much more refined control over the timeline. So here I am at 82.5 degrees azimuth, and if I zoom in, I can see that my yellow line is aligned with the dotted line of the red and black pins. Now, I want you to note something interesting about the thin yellow line as we scroll through time. So let's go back to sunrise at around 6:01 a.m. Notice that as we scrub through time, the yellow line becomes dotted. And what this indicates is that the mountain is actually blocking the sun from our view at the red pin. And the way that we can check this is by looking at the elevation of the sun at this time in the top panel, and we can compare that to the elevation difference between the red and black pins. So the top bar tells us that the elevation of the sun at this time is 3.71 degrees, give or take. And if I tap on the black pin to pull up the information between the red and black pins, I can see that the difference in elevation between the red and black pins is 7.28 degrees, which is greater than 3.71 degrees. Therefore, the terrain where the black pin is located will block the sun from being seen from the red pin's location. Now, if I continue to scroll through time, the dotted line eventually turns solid. And we can confirm that again by looking at the top panel and seeing that the elevation of the sun at this time is now 7.3 degrees, and that is greater than the elevation difference between the red and black pins of 7.28 degrees. And if I keep going in time, you can see that the elevation of the sun as it becomes more aligned with the observatory is now almost 7.6 degrees, which is certainly greater than 7.28 degrees. So now the next thing you can do that is pretty cool is scroll back to the pin-to-pin geodetic info panel. And at the bottom, you can see the height of the sun above the black pin, which in this case is 202 feet from the black pin. And so it is just starting to fully crest over the mountain at this time. And the size of the moon is 331 feet. And if I wanted to see how big that looked on the map relative to, say, the observatory, then I can visualize that by going into the map settings, click on sun, click on show sun size, click Done, and if I zoom in on the observatory, I can now see this thick yellow line over the thin yellow line, and that shows me how big the sun will appear from my shooting location relative to my subject. So in this example, we saw how we could use the red and black pins to evaluate whether the sun would be blocked by a mountain peak and at what time it would become visible from our shooting location. And we did this using the azimuth, elevation, and altitude information derived from the two pins. But what if you wanted to compose an image where your subject was front lit by the rising or setting sun, rather than having the sun rise or set behind a mountain? Well, we still need to use the red and black pins to figure that out, but in a very different way. And I'm going to show you that method in next week's episode. So hit subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.